Welcome to The Investigators. I'm Vanessa Murphy, investigative reporter with KLAS TV in Las Vegas. We have Kyle Paine here with us.
Hi, Vanessa.
Extraordinaire, investigative reporter extraordinaire.
I do my best.
An attorney, if you didn't know.
Right. I think people are catching on.
They're catching on, sure. All right, so we are going to talk about a story you recently reported. We went on a field trip together for one of your shoots. Tell us what it's about.
Well, first of all, when you do see these things, you should know that the majority of a Vanessa shot, at least the parts with me in it, which was so kind.
With a cell phone.
And so wonderful. Yeah, you did a great job. But basically, we got a tip. That's how most of these start. Did you ever watch Downton Abbey?
No.
Okay, well, most of the good stuff that happened started with a piece of mail or a telegram.
Okay.
Just like these investigators' stories start often with a phone call or an email. And this one started with a tip. And so we got a tip from a viewer who was living next door to someone who had just moved in and gotten birds. But it turns out that someone was Heidi Fleiss. And for those of you who don't know, Heidi Fleiss was so famous in the 1990s because she was I guess you would say, in charge of the highest of high-class call girls. She was a madam. She got busted by the federal government for running this huge sex-selling enterprise as a madam. And when push came to shove, she ended up going to prison, convicted at trial, because she would not give up the black book. She would not name names. And she did her time, and she got her street cred, and she is the kind of celebrity who was friends with people in Hollywood, the Hollywood elite. She was, at some point, arguably A-list. And she was fodder for the tabloids. So Vanessa and I both have a past in New York. When I was in college and I was in New York, she was in the tabloids every day.
Yes, the paper, yeah.
Unbelievable. And in the news, and in the national news. It wasn't just tabloid. It was incredible. Right. And it was sensational. And there are people of a certain age here at Channel 8 who thought, oh my God, Heidi Fleiss. There are others who didn't know her based on youth, and there are others who have been here a really long time and know that she's lived in Pahrump for almost 2 decades. And, you know, we're going to talk at length about how controversy follows her. Well, it followed her from L.A. to Pahrump with her birds and maybe some drug problems and other arrests. But she is what we would call a character. And so this story shows a lot of that character and gets into the bird battle, as you can see on the bottom of your screen.
And whether you agree or disagree with what she did, as you mentioned, she's a character. She's certainly interesting, and she did her time.
She did her time.
Paid the price.
Yes, and she could have gone into business for herself and made millions and millions of dollars here in Nevada with legal sex, as she told us at some point. She was all set up to do that. She could have gone into reclusivity. And most importantly, when 2 reporters show up at your house unannounced, she could have told us to pound sand. And she didn't.
We did not expect that.
No, it was wonderful.
For some background, you mentioned she was perhaps going to get involved in brothels, right? Because for those of you who don't know, if you're watching from outside of Las Vegas or outside of Nevada, here in Clark County, where the Las Vegas Strip is, prostitution is not legal.
Correct.
However, in Pahrump, there are legal brothels that is Nye County. But I know you have really prepared some sound bites and some background for us. Where are you going to take us?
Right. So number one, let's get to the story. We got a phone call from a viewer. Vanessa and I drove in the company vehicle. We went to the neighbor's house. She wasn't there. We called her. We thought, let's just get these people while we don't want to call and make appointments. Sometimes that can ruin our what we do. So we thought, maybe if we knock on a door and say, hey, what were you saying? So we spoke with the neighbor. She wasn't there. And we thought, let's go to Heidi's house. And so you're going to see both. But just so you know, we talked to the neighbor after we talked to Heidi. Whether they know it or not, these 2 tenants of this home in the Southeast Valley are getting on their next-door neighbor's absolute last nerve.
So here's the thing. They're flying outside. My bedroom window, they perch on the telephone wire that's right outside my bedroom window, and they squawk.
Squawking as early as 6 in the morning, says Shauna Cordova. who hasn't had a chance to meet these two high-flying culprits known by their given names, Gin and Juice, which may be cute, but not cute enough when they're doing this at the crack of dawn most days since...
I have a new neighbor. I have a new neighbor, and she has an affinity for macaws, and she likes to let them free roam.
And she's...
Heidi Fleiss.
Heidi Fleiss.
Our client is not going to make any comment. At this time, we're in trial.
Yes, that Heidi Fleiss, the one-time Hollywood madam who was convicted at trial and served a 3-year stretch in federal prison way back in the late 1990s, after, at the age of 32, being arrested for pandering, money laundering, and tax evasion. And that Heidi Fleiss, who couldn't make it through an airport.
Where are you off to today, Heidi?
Or down the street, no matter where she went.
They hate you already, boobas. What? They hate you.
Is now this Heidi Fleiss, 60 years old, leaving her home in Pahrump after some 16 years for this Las Vegas home she says is perfect, not just for Gin and Juice, but for all 30 of the birds she plans on bringing with her.
I'd say controversy follows you.
Yes, it does. I don't know. There's something wrong with me. I'll just admit it. There's something wrong with me.
But Fleiss says there was nothing wrong with her when she drove through the neighborhood here one day not too long ago and saw all the high trees near the cemetery across the street. Asked the owner, who by all accounts also had exotic birds here for over 20 years, if he wanted to sell, and according to county property records, passed papers just under a month ago. A purchase, she says, she made for her birds.
They're just birds. They're just birds flying, doing their thing, what they're supposed to do.
But what those birds are supposed to do and what they're legally allowed to do may not match. Fleiss's neighbor here, who made a noise complaint and called the county's code enforcement, says their street is in this green area on a map that prohibits the release of birds because of its proximity to Reed Airport. And this county development code says a homeowner can only have 20 birds. Heidi Fleiss has 30.
I feel that she's going to be very upset when she finds out what the county has to tell her about that.
I think she just doesn't like me, and there's a lot of people like that, and I'll never be able, I can't try and change her mind.
When we met Heidi Fleiss at her new home, she said she wasn't ready to move in yet. Still some work to do. But when she does, she says she plans to make things right with her neighbors. We'll keep you posted. I'm Kyle Paine, 8 News Now.
So Kyle, when we visited Heidi Fleiss at her home, and she did say, come on in, I'll talk to you, which does not always happen with reporters. So we appreciated that she was willing to talk about this. But one of her arguments was, the neighbor doesn't like me because I'm Heidi Fleiss. Did you get any sense of that?
No, she didn't say anything about Heidi in particular, but the tip that she emailed George Knapp, our chief investigator, she's a fan of George's. She said the thing said, you might find this newsworthy. Heidi Fleiss moved in next door and there are birds. So her lead at least was, hey, it's Heidi Fleiss, not my neighbor's really aggravating me with the noise. So you can make your own decision, I think, on that.
So you could argue she knew how to get someone's attention.
Yes.
We often hear about neighbor disputes, and we do cover many of them.
We do. I've done them.
But she knew that would get some attention.
It did.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
Welcome back to The Investigators. I'm Vanessa Murphy, joined by Kyle Paine, and we are talking about Kyle's story involving a battle between neighbors over birds. One of those neighbors is Heidi Fleiss. This was a two-parter for you. Take us to where part two will go here.
Well, so part one was what we would call successful. It did well online. It trended not only on our website, but on our sister station in LA. New York Post picked it up, and TMZ and People Magazine, and we look at that as a little bit of a badge of honor when the national media is nice enough to cite our work. And obviously, she's Heidi Fleiss. So part one did well enough, but also part one, we were pretty certain about what we reported in the first part about what we thought the county would say. The county took a couple days to get back to us. We were able to confirm, in fact, that Heidi was going to have an uphill battle with regard to the birds, not just with her neighbors, but with the county. And so that's where we went for part 2, was just to say, hey, the county actually confirms this stuff. What do you have to say? And that's where she said she's going to fight.
Meet Roscoe and Charlie, 2 beautiful macaws owned by Heidi Fleiss, the one-time Hollywood madam who did prison time for money laundering and tax evasion in the late 1990s. Roscoe and Charlie joined Gin and Juice at Fleiss's Southeast Valley home, on which she closed in February, leaving her home in Pahrump having fallen in love with the tall trees on this lush and leafy acre and a quarter. Hoping her birds will love it as much as she does, but trouble, which Fleiss admits seems to surround her, didn't take long to surface.
I'm irritated.
After her neighbor, Shauna Cordova, made a noise complaint because she hears this early most mornings, and called the county animal control, giving Fleiss this paperwork before we met with her earlier in the week. And Thursday, a spokeswoman for Clark County telling the 8 News Now investigators Fleiss can only have 20 birds inside her home. Fleiss planned to bring 30 and let them free outside, but the county says she's near the airport and her birds aren't allowed in the air here.
They don't fly near airports. They're terrified of airplanes.
Fleiss says she's devoted her life to these birds lately, and caging them is cruel because life, decades behind bars, frightens and terrifies them and makes them lonely.
They say dogs must stay in a crate until they die, and they're not allowed out. No one would stand for that. There's no way, especially Las Vegas.
Fleiss says she plans to speak with her legal team and even thanked her neighbor for helping draw publicity to the issue, but doing so in her own way.
I didn't know there was a Karen. What the heck? Everyone says it's a Karen, not just me. That's what Karens do, complain.
Here's Cordova, the neighbor, though, in her own defense.
Do you think you're a Karen?
No, absolutely not.
Fleiss says she hopes she and her neighbor can get past this and be friends, and that her birds may be less noisy once they've had time to adjust. I'm Kyle Paine, 8 News Now.
Did you ever think you'd ask someone
If they're a
they
Karen?
think they're a Karen?
No, but so the first time we met Heidi, she called the lady a Karen, but we were sort of off camera. I think she was talking to you actually, while I was shooting some other things. And but I knew that was a question that might come up, but we didn't use it. And then Heidi Fleiss started to say on social media, she started putting this woman on blast as a Karen. And, I don't make that judgment, but I felt it was a good question to ask. And no, I didn't think I'd ever ask anybody if they were a Karen. And this is beyond me, the Karen thing, because I think maybe it's an age thing, but I don't know. I think she's annoyed.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, we usually don't give our opinions, right? We really steer clear of that. But you could look at it both ways, right? You're a neighbor. If you're a homeowner, you expect some peace and quiet, right? And suddenly you have these birds chirping outside your window. And there are rules, right? There are codes to follow. But at the same time, you can see Heidi Fleiss's point in that if the birds aren't even flying above the trees, should they be able to fly?
Right. And especially the proximity to the airport, they called it an airstrike hazard because the birds could fly into the plane. Heidi Fleiss vehemently disagreed with that. She said macaws are terrified of planes. They don't fly anywhere near them. But I mean, that would be famous last words in the event they ended up in the wrong part of the airspace.
Right. So what now then?
Well, what now is she says she's going to speak with her lawyers and they are going to fight it. And she thanked her neighbor, who she called a Karen, for bringing publicity because she says that she's going to fight this and people need to know and that birds shouldn't be part of that, or her type of birds shouldn't be part of that type of restriction. So there's going to be a fight. I think that if you learned anything from our first couple of stories, it's that I think Heidi would cooperate with the media and there probably would be additional reporting to be done.
And, if you are talking about danger with flights, I mean, that gets your attention, right? You have to follow the rules for that.
They have the map for a reason. And it's not just Harry Reid Airport. It's, airports in other parts of southern Nevada where, the one example in particular was that guy, Sully Sullenberger, who when the geese flew into his engine, he had to land in the water. And we don't need that. But I mean, Heidi Fleiss knows her birds. And I do believe there's some authenticity to her argument that, maybe this is an inappropriate use of some of these rules in this particular type of situation.
And when the neighbor initially contacted us, she was upset by a few birds. Heidi Fleiss has many more birds that were on their way from Pahrump, correct?
She says they're up to 30. She said she could limit it to 20. She understood that rule, but she said, most of her birds don't fly. Many of them because they had lives in cages, and she said their wings barely open. We saw one bird who wasn't her bird because the previous owner had birds, and it was bare-chested, like it plucks all of its feathers because of the problems that they have living a life in a cage, which Heidi made it sound like could be up to 80 years, which seems like a long time to be in a cage.
Anything else? What do you think? Where do you think this will go?
I think that Heidi will sue the county. I have no reason to think that, but I don't think she's screwing around.
Also just a side note here, how many times do we get complaints about HOAs in Clark County? And this is a case. I don't think there's an HOA there.
I don't think so, no. These are single-family homes.
And HOAs can be a pain, but oftentimes they protect you from having a neighbor with 30 birds.
Right. Well, in I believe if we were to survey the HOAs, there's probably all sorts of pet restrictions, including wild bird restrictions. So I don't think even one bird would be allowed to get into the airspace of most HOAs.
You want to take a break?
Sure.
Let's take a break.
Let's take a break.
Welcome back to The Investigators. I'm Vanessa Murphy, joined by Kyle Paine. We are talking about Kyle's report on a battle between neighbors over birds, and one of those neighbors is Heidi Fleiss, and I know we want to hear more from her.
Right. So when we didn't know what to expect when we got there, and again, you were nice enough to go with me, and I think there was a definite curiosity factor. Like, what's this going to be like? Is this still? I didn't know anything about her. I haven't heard her name in a long time. So we got there, and I didn't know if she was going to be combative, and I'm ready for whatever I see when I get to a door. So I interviewed her, and I didn't know what I was going to do, or how long I was going to get to speak with her. So I wanted to not only find out what she said about the neighbor, I read her the email from the neighbor, but I also wanted to know what she's up to, and where is she these days, and what does she think, and so we the first 6-minute interview, because we had several clips. This one was more about, what's up, Heidi?
Her
like,
background.
Where you been? Yeah, and so that's what this is.
Let's take a listen.
And people will always, there's half people, or more than half, will always hate me. But I'm not trying to win a popularity contest.
Well, we didn't come here because we hate you. It's very interesting to meet you.
Look, I'm not Jeffrey Epstein. I did consensual sex. Nobody ever ran a business at the level I did. No one. It was consensual sex. There's none of this weirdo stuff. So
you're proud of all that past of yours?
It's the life I've led. What am I to do? You gonna feel shame your whole life? I guess about some things, but what do I care? It's consensual sex. I went to prison for 3 years, federal prison. I did my time.
And so she did mention she's working on a Netflix series or documentary or some sort of program with Netflix. And the truth is, she probably has a lot of secrets.
There are a lot of secrets, but even just if she gave her reaction these many years later to what we know as the chronicled past, I think it would be a big deal. And when I met with her the second time, she told me Aubrey Plaza is playing her in a new movie, a biopic about her. The woman that played Meadow Soprano in The Sopranos played her in another movie. And she told me she would get scripts and she would get calls all the time. And she was telling me she was driving down the highway in her Porsche one time, and her agent gave her her manager gave her a script, and she threw it out the window of her, or the top of her Porsche into the highway, and she never read it because she didn't care. She didn't want to be associated. But now,
she has a passion now. And I think when we were talking with her, I asked her why birds and where does that come from? And she said she became interested and developed this passion when she was here in Nevada, as you mentioned. And she talks more about that in our next soundbite, right?
Yes.
It has nothing to do with macaws, nothing at all. It doesn't say macaws. Why would it say macaws? Who has macaws flying? No, they're sequestered to little cages until they die. It's disgusting. It's such a cruel existence. They only experience fear, loneliness, terror. That's why they pluck. Look at this. They're not pets. It shouldn't be in my home, your home, or anyone's home. One macaw is too many. They deserve to be free someplace and flying around.
But here?
Look at it, doesn't matter where they are. They deserve. If there was a park here in Las Vegas where macaws were flying, I guarantee you people would go see them and it would be an attraction.
So,
she's saying let the birds fly
Yes.
too, which is part of the argument. So Heidi Fleiss saying let the birds fly. They don't belong in cages. She adores these. She speaks about them like they're people, which I think a lot of pet owners can identify with, right? And the neighbor is saying these birds don't belong here in the middle of a neighborhood. They're making noise and they pose a danger, the neighbor says.
Right. And the neighbor owns a goat and 3 dogs and chickens and roosters. And
It's an interesting neighborhood.
It is. But, you can see from that, Heidi is media savvy. She knows what a soundbite is. And she also didn't refuse to answer one single question. I pried into her personal life when I didn't know how far we would get with her. But then, she lets me into her home the second day, and she would have talked about anything. She had no secrets. She did say that she didn't want to necessarily go into everything because I think, there's some stuff she wants to keep for herself for her Netflix special. But that beginning of that particular clip was about how she felt the regulations may or may not apply. And, I think the takeaway was she wants to talk to the county and she wants to talk with the neighbor because I'm sure it would benefit her and her neighbor if they could bury the hatchet.
And to be fair, you said Heidi was willing to answer all the questions and was flexible. The neighbor was too. I mean, you asked the neighbor to her face if she's a Karen.
Right.
So they both were willing to talk about this. You always hope you can find some sort of middle ground. I think most people would agree they don't want to see any type of danger as far as flight.
No. When
you were there, I meant to ask you earlier, did you see any of the birds flying exceptionally high?
No, I didn't. But I think we went to the neighbor's house the next day, and we saw one of them high in the trees that was on the border. So I mean, they're not like little pigeons that
house
go.
Birds
right. They're definitely they go up there. And I think I saw a posting on social media. Somebody said, "Does anybody know why these 2 birds are flying over everybody's houses?" And then they come back, and who knows if that's true. But they come back to their perch at Heidi's house. Also, Heidi had a big thing on her nose. I don't know if you could tell.
Right. Yeah, that first day.
And so I didn't know what to make of it. But if you're going to ask a woman if she's a Karen, you may say, "Hey, what happened to your nose?" And Heidi said that a perch crashed on her nose, and that wasn't an infection of any sort. So she was adamant, especially after part 1, that she thought I should do my part to make sure people understood how seriously she took the safety of the birds and why she wanted to do this. And I think that's the topic of the next
Let's
clip
go
here.
to it.
But there's a bird in a cage in a basement that's been there 40 years and has another 40 years to go. And no one is coming for it unless I try harder. And look, there's 9 billion people on this earth. No one's fighting for them but me like this. No one is doing this but putting themselves out there but me. And I gave up a very different life to do this because it touched my heartstrings like nothing else.
Are they enjoying it here?
They love it. They love flying around. They love the trees. Like the second I brought them here, I just brought them, thought they would check it out and come back to Pahrump with me. They would not come back because they loved it here. They love it here.
They do love it there. It's beautiful. The backyard was beautiful.
It was. The backyard was unexpected. I mean, the front of the house was nice, right? But you have these old school Vegas houses with all of these surprises. And this one, the backyard was quite a surprise. And she's doing the renovations. But this is a good lesson, perhaps, if you are purchasing a house and there is something unusual about your purchase. You got to do your homework and look at the regulations and codes, right?
There's so much greenery there in that house. It's so lush and beautiful that if she doesn't have a battle here, she may have one about being an excessive water user, trying to keep that.
Oh, boy. Is this part 3 now?
No, I don't think so.
Kyle, stir in the pot. All right. Well, I hope they can reach some sort of middle ground. I think many people would agree that there should not be a danger to flights, so we have to sort that out.
Or the birds.
Or the birds, correct. And I think there will be another update. We have to see how this gets resolved. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks for watching.